for the Hope of Wild Places, the first event in Oregon Natural Desert Association's 2021 High Desert Speaker Series. For those of you who have taken part before, welcome back. And for those of you joining for the first time, we are excited to have you here. We're going to get underway in just a minute or two. We'll give folks just a minute to join us. So getting underway here in just a moment. All right. Well, now that we're all here, good evening, hello, welcome. I'm Corey Harlan. I am ONDA's campaign manager. This is the first event in ONDA's 2021 High Desert Speaker Series, The Hope of Wild Places. And tonight we have brought together two powerful storytellers to talk to you about their collaboration highlighting the Owyhee Canyonlands. If you have logistical questions during the presentation tonight, there is a chat box there at the bottom of your screen. You also will be able to enter questions that you have for our speakers tonight. And just a few notes, you'll also be automatically muted for this presentation. And if at any point you want to change your speaker view, you can do that at the view icon in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Tonight, I am speaking to you from Bend, Oregon, on lands traditionally and presently inhabited by members of the Wasco, Warm Springs, Paiute, Bannock, and Shoshone tribes. ONDA incorporates a land acknowledgement into our events to raise awareness of Indigenous presence and lands rights. And today I have the honor of introducing someone who speaks to that Indigenous presence directly. With us tonight is Paiute tribal elder Wilson Wiwa. As a spiritual leader for his tribe, Wilson travels to tribal gatherings, acting as an orator, storyteller, and funerary officiant, singing the burial songs of his people. Wilson is the great-great-grandson of two of the most powerful and important chiefs in Northern Paiute history, Chief Palaina and Chief Wiawiwa. He grew up hearing the stories of his family, tribe, and past lifeways as they pertain to his life, particularly for his grandmother, Maggie Wiwa. His travels throughout the ancient Great Basin homeland of the Paiutes with her, and since then, have enriched his knowledge of Paiute history, spirituality, and legends. His book, Legends of the Northern Paiute, shares and preserves 21 previously unpublished Northern Paiute legends, originally told through the storytelling season of winter. Wilson is presented on Native American issues related to health, spirituality, environment, and treaty rights as they pertain to water and land for the College of William and Mary and many other universities and museums. And he served as a consultant for OSU of Northern Paiute History and Ethnobiology. Wilson was elected to the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs 28th Tribal Council in 2019 and has been a council member in the past. He is the last enrolled tribal member who speaks Paiute out of fewer than 100 total speakers of Northern Paiute. Wilson, if I wanted to say thank you in Northern Paiute, how would I say that?
Bijayo.
Bijayo. We also have Jason Houston here with us as well. Jason is a photographer and a filmmaker whose work explores how we live on the planet and with each other, from the perspective of community, culture, and the human experience. He has worked in over 30 countries on projects ranging from Indigenous land rights in the Amazon to small-scale fisheries throughout the tropics to wildland firefighting in the American West. His work has been published editorially and exhibited publicly around the world. And he is a senior fellow at International League of Conservation Photographers and a fellow at Wake Forest University's Center for Energy, Environment, and Sustainability. Jason, where are you joining us from tonight?
So I'm typically based in Boulder on Arapaho lands, but we are on a project in New York City, actually quarantining, and looked it up in New York City as Lenape lands.
Well, thank you both so much for being with us tonight. We're going to start our evening together with a screening of the film, The Oahe Project. So Jason, before we start that film, can you share a little bit of background on why you became interested in the Oahe Canyonlands and tell us a little bit about the film we're about to watch?
Sure. It's this whole project has been kind of a long adventure. In the late 2019, I got a small grant to address protection of public lands in the United States, sort of in the context of the previous administration's assault on those protections, and just to make sure that we continue to see that as important. In looking at what the different options were and connecting with ONDA, I chose to come out to the Oahe and see how I could help with the efforts to increase the protection for the Oahe. Obviously, in early 2020, we hit the pandemic, and from that point on, the plans and the project had to evolve sort of continuously. I wasn't able to actually get out into the Oahe, but I did want to represent the diversity of voices that feel that the Oahe is important. And I connected with Wilson, and he shared with us some stories. I really just was, camera operating and providing, a little bit of a conduit for his stories. And what we came up with is where we're at. It's still a work in progress. There's still the opportunity to add some content to it. We're exploring whether or not we might collaborate with some artists from the region as well. And ultimately, we're looking at whether or not we can produce this as a 3-channel video installation. So that would be multiple screens, either projections or like large screen TV style screens. And you'll see in the edit how that might apply.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and cue up the film, The Oahe Project.
My name is Wilson Wee-Waa. I'm a member of the Northern Paiute tribe, and I reside on the Warm Springs Indian Reservation of Oregon. And my ancestry comes from Southeast Oregon in the Northern Great Basin. My people were displaced from our home country, which was the Oahe area. My great-great-great-grandfather was Chief Wiawiwa, who signed the Malheur Treaty that made the largest reservation in Oregon, which was the Malheur Indian Reservation in Southeast Oregon, and it was 1.7 million acres. And so that's why I go every year back into that country to leave my footprint there. And I've taken my sisters, I've taken my nephews, I've taken my grandsons and told them, this is our land. As long as you have that in your heart, that I told you this is our land, it'll always be our land. We may not have a house here, we may not live down here, but it's still our land. You guys are here with me digging roots because my grandma taught me that this was our land. I remember traveling with my grandma when I was in my early 20s and hear her talk about, even in her generation, how the Oregon Desert changed to a dry, bleak place, and that many of the low areas in the Oregon Desert used to actually be meadows in her day. She saw those meadows disappear and those trees dry up and fall down. And that's kind of sad because it makes me, as a spiritual leader for the Northern Paiute people and spiritual leader for the people on the plateau. It makes me look back at the prophecies that my grandmother's generation had regarding the changes that were going to come. I used to travel across the desert between Bend, Oregon and Burns, Oregon, and there were no trailers, there were no side roads. There were just the two little gas stations in the middle of the desert that you went through. And today, there's cattle ranches, there's alfalfa fields, there's irrigation systems, there's trailer houses. It's like driving down a road and seeing somebody throw out a bag full of trash and seeing the trash scatter all over the side of the road. And that's what I think when I see all the development that has happened out in the desert. And so there are times that I wonder if all those words that were shared by those old people that were born in the 1800s, I see their words materializing because our world is changing. If we don't take care of this earth, we're going to destroy it, and there may come a time when we won't be able to turn back to heal what has been destroyed. And I do think that people have a right to be a part of the land, but I think they need to respect the land too. In that if they're going to move out there and become a part of the land, that they remember that the resources that our land gives is in limited supply. I think we should be recognizing that what my grandma generation left for me is something that needs to be left for my grandchildren. But as we've seen in world history, we've eroded every nation in the world. We've eroded a piece of that culture and that land and that water, smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And what we pass to the next generation isn't as robust as the generation before it. And it saddens me that there might come a time that the only thing that our great-grandchildren or the children that we'll never see will only see those things in pictures. Pictures can't breathe. Pictures can't blow on your face. Pictures can't quench your thirst. Pictures can't feed your soul. So that's why it's important to do something now. And to some people, the millions of acres that are out there may seem pretty immense and expansive. But one time, the whole state of Oregon was immense and expansive. And so taking the time to help the land, no matter which land it is, which river, which lake, which canyon, whatever it is, taking the time to protect it and to save it for the future is giving a gift for the future generations, that they won't be robbed of what I was able to experience, that they'll be able to find peace and solace and hope in what has been left behind for them. We need to save those lands for the future so that they can have what our past people had, a sense of identity with the land. And that's why it needs to be protected. And that's why there needs to be policies that can help to regulate how we mitigate problems that we see happening to the land. And I know that a lot of people are against policies and against regulations. But it's okay for a herd of cattle to destroy the land and eat it up and compact the ground so that indigenous plants disappear off the land. And then in the same instance for them to say no trespassing. Can we balance that to the point where everybody wins? Many of the places that held a draw for our people, they're still there, but our generations of people have passed. And in each generation, there's been somebody that has gone to that very place and brought back with them the power from that place. And as long as that story is being told, that power will continue to come from there. But when the stories die, that power will die too. That's why we have to keep the story going. All of us.
Thank you, Jason. Wilson, you are a storyteller and an oral historian for your culture. A few years ago, you went on a rafting trip through the Oahe Canyonlands with ONDA staff and volunteers. And I've heard you tell some good stories about how you saw and appreciated different qualities in the landscape, like the abundance of food available based on your ancestral connection to this land. Could you share a few of those memories and impressions from that trip with us tonight?
Yes, I can. And I'm glad to be here tonight with everybody that has signed on to listen to the message that is being passed on. Bishant mo no yarwan Wilson Wiwa Minaniana. Nunuwa agaitsi Deepa White, Warm Springs, Oregon mi ikatipa mi ni tam on shamumuara pakatipa kwa nimi katip mumuara patuwa white wunaiwun o white mumuara patuhonna minatuzwa nokos shutipa yao mi novi. This evening, I'm talking with you. My name is Wilson Wiwa. I come from Warm Springs, Oregon. And the land that I'm speaking about is my land. My old people lived on that land from the beginning of time. They hunted there, they fished there, they gathered roots and medicine there. And the land is our home. We've never been disconnected from that land for as long as our story continues. And each generation has been given a task of carrying that story. To us, the Native American people, and to the Paiute people, those histories, those genealogies, the knowledge of the plants and the food and the water, the changing of the seasons, all have their own story. And the more that we tell those things to our children and our grandchildren, that helps, that hope for us to continue to acknowledge that land as our home. To those people that have never come into the wilds of Oregon or into the wilds that are left across the nation to explore and to see the beauty of land in its natural state, are missing out on something that could nurture them for the rest of their life. And we as Indian people, the protections that we've given to our children through the stories, the respect that we teach them when we have ceremonies to become a hunter or a fisherman or a gatherer, or one that helps others by having the medicines available. Each of those stories take years to develop for an individual. And so when we have the opportunity to share that knowledge with our own people, it has great meaning to our people. There are stories that the use of the land that our people would tell that would make you cry because of the harsh times that helped to develop our endurance to live upon that land. Our stories are not about the individual. Our stories are about the survival of families and about that individual being a part of the family. But even more so, that family being a part of the greater tribe that shared the songs, the language, the ceremonies, the knowledge that comes from different parts of the land that we lived on. Every elevation, from the rivers to the tops of the mountains, had gifts that they gave to our people for our use. The migrations of the elk, the deer, the buffalo, the bighorn sheep, even the smallest of insects. Some of them were seasonal. Some of them would not come around for a few years. Our people's ability to predict the changes in the weather, our people's ability to pray for rain and to make it happen, our people's ability to heal those that were sick with medicines from the land, are all a part of that story. And when you live that kind of a life, the kind of a life that I grew up in from a little boy, hearing the stories from my grandparents and then confirming those stories with my parents, my uncles, my aunts, all added to the bigger picture of how our people lived. They gave us a snapshot of our life way before technology, before cars and automobiles and airplanes. The simplicity of life that our people lived gave us appreciation for our surroundings and especially our environment. And that's why I believe that our people migrated over such immense areas of land to gather food, to follow the herds of game, to know when to leave a creek or river because it would get low in the summertime, and to be able to go across miles of desert and know where to find the springs to sustain them, were lifeways that were learned over tens of thousands of years. Our people have legends that add to those lifeways. Our legends talk about when the mountains could talk to one another, about when the mountains fought against each other. Our legends tell us of how our people, through prayer and supplication, were able to stave off starvation. And all those traditions and customs are embodied in our lifeways. They're embodied in our legends. They're embodied in our genealogies. So when we go out to the desert, we don't see a bleak area like the settlers saw when they started coming over on the Oregon Trail. And there were times in our history that our people witnessed those settlers cannibalizing their dead. And the Northern Paiute people wondering how mankind could do such an atrocity when there was an abundance of food growing all around them. Roots, berries. They saw the settlers, the explorers, fighting sickness. And it was wonderment that they thought, how could these people be sick when there's medicine plants all around them? And so through time, our people were taught that we had to become civilized. We had to go to school and learn math and writing and other traits of civilization. And in the history of my people, some of our chiefs, which included my great-great-grandfather, Wiawiwa, when they were asked to go on to the reservation, one of our leaders, Chief Egan, asked, why would I bring my people onto the reservation when they come onto the reservation and they're starving, they're sick, they have nothing to give them hope. Why should I take them to the reservation when I'm living in the mountains and I have deer and fish and roots and berries and medicine? And so I think it's that same thought that has been with Native American people across the nation of, do we sacrifice our traditional ways and customs to become civilized? And what cost is that for our people? Because when we lose everything I've talked about, we start to lose our identity. And then we start to lose our relationship with the land. When I visited the Owyhee River as a guest of the Oregon Natural Desert Association on a rafting trip, I was able to see the beauty that I only heard in the oral histories of my people that lived on that land. And the bands that roamed the desert in those Aboriginal times took their name from the foods that were available on that land. Some of those bands were called Agaidikad, the salmon eaters, because salmon used to migrate upriver on the Owyhee River, clear to Fort McDermott, clear to Duck Valley Reservation. The plateaus above the Owyhee River had an abundance of roots, and the canyons had an abundance of various types of berries that our people used for food. The springs, the small creeks provided fresh, cold water in that type of an environment. And like my grandma said, in her time, she was born in 1882, in June or July of that year. And from that time, as she followed the root ripening time to gather roots to supplement our grocery store foods, she saw the changes in the land. She saw the many meadows that used to be in the Oregon desert. She saw them dry up and be overtaken by sagebrush and rabbit brush and become dust bowls. And she pointed out in the 60s and 70s where there used to be springs that our people relied on during wartime, when when my people were fighting for the protection and resources of our land. And their springs were no longer there. But being able to raft the Owyhee River and the Owyhee Canyon, and being 62 years old and not in the best shape of my life, but having that feeling inside myself to hike to the top of the rim with people younger than me, because I did not want to pass up that opportunity to see why my ancient people lived in that land. And to get up on those plateaus and see the dried up leaves of many of the foods that we used for, many of the plants that we used for foods. I think on that trip, I identified 5 different plants that our people used for food. The rock shelters that have been documented in that area, that have been carbon dated to over 10,000 years old, shows the footprint of my people in that area. And the technologies, the ancient technologies of utilizing the woods, the rocks, the different fibers from the plants that help them to survive there for 20,000 years, for 100,000 years. And to be able to see those plants still there was amazing to me. And I could see why my old people, my ancestors, were baffled by why the settlers and the explorers were starving to death when there was so much food in that land, so many medicines out there for the taking. And that's why we have to tell the story. Sometimes the story isn't the happiest story, because many of my ancestors are buried in that land. They were born there, they lived there, and they died there. And in later times, in the 1800s, their death came about because they were protecting the land that they called home. They weren't uncivilized people. If you gauge civilization by how a people survive, then certainly my people were civilized because they learned how to use the resources from the land to be there for 100,000 years. And like Chief Egan said, all those people that are getting an education and living on the reservation or starving and dying, and my people who live in the mountains are still alive, and they're not hungry, and they have a place to sleep, and they have a place to live. That's still true today. If we look for that in the land, in the shrinking lands that are available for us to wander on. Today, when I go out there, today I need a permit to go hunting. I need a permit to go fishing. I don't have the freedom to go on certain lands because there are no trespassing signs. And even that, as tragic as it is a part of the story. When you go to places as beautiful as the Waihi Canyonlands, it was not surprising to me to see the pictographs and petroglyphs that were there. For my people, the pictographs and petroglyphs are a footprint left by my ancient people that land belonged to us. In those times, there were only certain individuals gifted with the knowledge to paint the figures on the rocks or to peck the figures onto the rocks. And those rocks, from time immemorial, have carried that story for my people of our connection to the land. And when I saw the destruction of those pictographs and petroglyphs by people that used chisels and hammers to try to knock out chunks of those pictographs and petroglyphs so that they could take something home, was a destruction of my people's story, a desecration of the footprints that were left there for my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. To see those figures used as targets for rifles and to see the pucks in the rock desecrating those sacred writings. Brought a sadness to my heart. I appreciated the group that I was with to allow me to go by myself and to pray and to sing the songs that were entrusted with me to gain my composure. To me, that destruction is as ruinous as the Church of England when it burned down. And every artist around the world, every architect around the world cried out that that church could never, ever be remodeled to the way that it was when it was originally built. In Afghanistan, when they bombed the sleeping Buddha, there was world outcry about the destruction of that temple. But the hurt that I carry is people don't view the pictographs and petroglyphs, the rock shelters, the ancient camping places of my people as a sacred place. And as we become civilized and our land, our wild lands get smaller and smaller, pretty soon a part of that sacredness starts to disappear. I've gone to meetings where some of the ski resorts are using new technologies to dim the lights at nighttime so they don't invade the pristine nature of the sky. And that's the way it is in the Waihi country. That at night, it was so pitch black that you could look up and you could see all those legendary figures in the constellations that we have names for in the Paiute language. To not have city lights, fog in the skies so that you couldn't even see the moon. To even at nighttime, we stayed on a sandy beach, and to be in your tent at nighttime and to hear the crickets or whatever, spiders or lizards or maybe even snakes crawling on the sand next to your tent. Sounds you'd never hear in an apartment building. Sounds you'd never hear in your own house. And that's why when I went through that country, I was so elated. My happiness was so much that at the time, I had no words that could express what I was seeing. I guess in a way too, I didn't have enough eyes to have a 360-degree view of what was ahead of me, was to the right, to the left, and what was behind me. Because no matter where I turned as a native of the land, there was beauty, unexplainable beauty.
Wilson, thank you for sharing those memories and impressions of this remarkable landscape. Jason, there's a powerful moment in the film when Wilson says, "Pictures can't blow on your face." As a photographer, how does that make you feel? And do you agree?
I totally agree. I mean, I guess ironically, it's actually why I'm a photographer, is because if that's all we're left with, then as Wilson said, we're screwed, you know? So the challenge as a photographer is to do my best to bring it to life enough that people want to actually experience more. And if I can do that well enough and end up out of a job, then that's awesome.
Well, we called this discussion this offering tonight, The Hope of Wild Places. And so I want to talk about the role of hope. And I've heard some interesting remarks from people in the conservation community lately. I'm thinking of an interview from environmental journalist Ashley Ahern. And she says, quote, "I don't have much use for hope. I'm more interested in having courage," unquote. And another from Jane Goodall, renowned primatologist and anthropologist who has worked extensively on conservation and animal welfare issues. Quote, "I do have hope. Nature is enormously resilient. Humans are vastly intelligent. The energy and enthusiasm that can be kindled among young people seems without limit. And the energy and enthusiasm, and the human spirit is indomitable. But if we want life, we will have to stop depending on someone else to save the world. It is up to us, you and me, all of us." And so a final question for you both before we turn to some questions from our audience tonight. Is hope given or is it earned? And Wilson, why don't we start with your thoughts here?
I think that hope is neither given nor earned. Hope is something that will continue to make you strive for the light at the end of the tunnel. And you don't earn it. It's a part of your experience. It's a part of that roadmap that you get from listening to somebody else's story. It's a process that you gain when you find the inner fulfillment in your life to want to get to an enriched place that something or someone has. And when you process that, hope becomes the vehicle to move you forward. Hope is always there. It's free for the taking. And many people lose hope because they haven't been taught to find that process to move forward. I guess you look at anything in this world, some of our veterans that have gone across the sea to war and come back with a missing limb. Sometimes they lose hope, but because of technology, they're able to walk on a prosthetic, something they didn't think they'd ever do again, because they found something to give them hope to move forward. And it's the same way with the land. I've heard it said over and over, for probably 30 years, that at what point will we get on that journey when our land will not be able to renew itself? But I have hope that our land will heal and that we are the process to give hope to that land. I don't know if I've answered the question, but that's what I feel.
Thank you, Wilson. You absolutely have. Jason, how about you?
I have to follow that, really.
Well,
I,
it's up
I
to
think
you.
I'll take a stab. I agree. I think it's a perspective that we choose, right? Hope on its simplest level is an optimistic state of mind. And if you start to process it, it's an expectation of the way you want the world to be. So it's that first step towards the action that we actually need to take to realize the kind of world that we want to live in. That's how I would see it, I guess.
Yeah, and for me, I think the hope I find has a lot to do with the people who want to be a part of helping protect the land and want to be a part of ensuring that it's here for future generations. And I think that can be in sort of an eternal source of hope, is that we can find that in one another too. So I think that now it's about 6:30, so we are going to sort of stay together tonight till about just probably until around 6:50 or so, maybe 7. We'll see how long we stick around here for, but we definitely wanted to have time for some questions from all of you joining us tonight. So I feel free. There's a question box. There's also a chat box down at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to enter in either, but I think the question box is a little more streamlined for the folks helping us on the back end with this event. So definitely plug your questions in there, and I'm gonna pull up some questions that we've got from the audience, and we'll see where we go here. Okay, so first question was, how long was the filmmaking process? Jason and Wilson, did you work together to determine what parts of Wilson's story were most important to keep in the short 15 minutes that we saw?
It was actually just 10 minutes. And the process was interesting because it's really not my story to tell. And I didn't want to be in a position of editorializing it or even interpreting the story. But obviously we need to, the goal was to make something that was short and digestible in either a gallery setting or some kind of presentation setting like this, where it can loop in 10 or 15 minutes. So when Wilson and I met, I sat down, I said the cameras were rolling, and he started talking, and a couple hours later he stopped talking. And the entire time I was there, I was trying to process and understand as well as I could from my much less informed perspective on the place and the history and his experiences, sort of what the essence of what he was saying were. And I took a stab at pulling that together, honoring his story as much as I could. And then Wilson looked at it, and it was 100% up to Wilson what finally came through there. I didn't want anything in there that he questioned or felt was incomplete or anything. And I hope I accomplished that, Wilson. You can speak to how it was for you.
Any thoughts?
Well,
there?
it's pretty much like Jason said. We really didn't have a formal meeting. Somebody had the idea that we needed to put something together to educate. And I went into it with that in mind, because many times we look to conservationists and environmentalists to have the answers for us. And many times people don't come to the Native American community, ask for our input. And for me, it was an opportunity to tell our story from our perspective, to add to those stories of the conservationists and environmentalists, and to organizations like the Oregon Natural Desert Association, and to be able to touch a wider community by using modern technology. And so I didn't know exactly what Jason was coming for, and I didn't know how many questions he was gonna ask me. But like he said, while he was setting up the cameras, I was grilling him about his feeling about the project. So in a way, I was drawing out of him what he hoped to get out of the filming. And so when he had his introductory questions that he asked, I had already had in my mind what I was going to say. And since he didn't give me a timeline of, well, I'm going to be with you for 45 minutes, I went with it. I took the ball and kept running until I ran out of space to run. And so 10 minutes is probably the tip of the iceberg of the approximately 2 hours of film that he did do.
I'll add too, just because that makes me uncomfortable to think that I even editorialized it as much as cutting it down as we did. But part of my responsibility is to, as Wilson said, to communicate this to white Northern American conservation audience. And so, maybe my role, if there's a role in helping just shape that story at all, is to help form it in a way that communicates appropriately to that audience. And I hope that's all the, input I really had to that. And I think the only question I asked you, Wilson, was, and it wasn't even a question, it was, would you state your name and explain your I think that's all it was.
Well, we're so glad that you did. I think that, just been sort of looking at the feedback from folks who have been joining us tonight, and this is clearly just really very powerful. Very grateful that you two came together to help create this and then to be willing to share it with all of us. So there's a few more questions here I'll ask. So Wilson, how can we as Oregon residents best acknowledge and honor these stories that you've shared with us?
You want the short answer or the long answer?
Whatever you'd like to share.
I think this project is a great example of sharing the story. And I'm reading some of the comments that are in the chat box.
Mm-hmm.
And people are asking for the video.
Mm.
And they're actually asking if the 2-hour filming can be made into segments to catch the entire message of the interview. And when people ask for food, we have to feed them. And education is a good way to feed people. And currently, I don't know if any groups, Native American groups like ONDA, but my presence working with ONDA is a start for us to start to acknowledge those lands that are valuable to the Northern Paiutes in Oregon, as well as other tribes. And I know that ONDA works with other tribes in the Northwest to accomplish those goals. And so I guess my advice would be to support those groups that support Native American interests also in the land.
Thank you, Wilson. Jason, did you have any thoughts to share to follow up on that, or should I turn to a new question here?
It's up to Wilson whether and how we continue to share more of the content. It's not my story. But the film, the piece that we have made, I hope it's widely available to people. I have no interest other than distributing it to people who want to hear it.
Yeah, and that's another question we have here. So where will this film be available? And I think we're talking about the current kind of 10-minute 10-minute version that you shared tonight. It sounds like there's interest in the additional footage, and that sounds like perhaps a conversation that we can continue after the presentation and discussion tonight. But for the 10-minute film, where could folks find that, and where do you anticipate it'll be made available?
I would say follow up through ONDA, and we'll communicate that way. That's probably the easiest way to make sure that it's available. I mean, I'm looking into different outlets and different opportunities for places to share it. Everything from, political venues where it might have some impact on policy and that sort of thing, to, museum spaces or any other spaces that might sort of help expand the audience for it as well. But let's say that ONDA can continue to sort of play a leadership role in making sure people know where to see it, if that works for y'all.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's see, we've got a few more questions here. So Wilson, we've had a few people asking about how they can hear more of your stories, and are there any books that you recommend? We know that you have a book yourself, and that's called Legends of the Northern Paiute, which has 21 previously unpublished Northern Paiute legends. Are there any other books that you would recommend, or other ways for folks to hear more of your stories?
I've been a speaker for over 30 years, and as was mentioned in the introduction, I do help the University of Oregon, Oregon State University, Washington State University. I've been called to speak at the College of William and Mary. I think if I'm invited to speak at some venue, and if I could fit it into my schedule, which is sometimes hard to do, that could take up to a year. I'm always glad to be a part of speaking to groups. I think there was close to 500 people on tonight. Some of them have signed off, but I'm not intimidated by large groups. But I do respect, and I hope that people respect, that smaller groups, there's a little more ability to ask questions and make a full evening of it. And I have been asked by historical societies to do a 45-minute presentation that turned into 3 hours long. So, I mean, I'm willing to do it, but it has to fit my schedule.
Certainly, yes, yes. And I think just another note in here, just really wanted to make sure that I express and convey just the deep gratitude that people are sharing, you know, in the Q&A and in the chat of just, you know, just deep gratitude to you, Wilson, for sharing your words and your knowledge with us tonight. To you and Jason coming together, you know, two powerful storytellers, each in your own right, to really bring this forward. And it really seems like it's really striking a chord with folks. And clearly when we did have almost 500 people on, this is something that folks want to hear more about, want to, you know, really have open ears, open hearts, open minds, and really want to hear more of this. And so I think that, you know, certainly we can think of ways to make the Oahe project more widely available. We'll keep working with you both behind the scenes on that and making sure our membership is aware of it. But it certainly seems like there's a call here for, you know, greater engagement and work and thinking about how we really bring forward these Native American voices. And so I think that, you know, we really are seeing that in what has played out tonight. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that before we wrap it up for the evening. So were there any closing thoughts that either of you want to share with the group before I, you know, thank some folks and we wrap it up for the evening?
Oh, what's that? I'm busy reading the chat. So.
I know, well, it's going crazy. There's so much stuff. There's so much good stuff in there. So yes, no doubt. Well, I think we will leave it there for the evening. You know, I just again want to express the deep gratitude from our community to each of you for making this evening possible, for making this film possible. Truly appreciated you guys sharing your stories and your knowledge and guiding us through the Oahe this evening. I would like to recognize and thank First Interstate Bank for sponsoring the 2021 High Desert Speaker Series. We have a special thanks and a shout out to Back Porch Coffee Roasters, Dudley's Bookshop Cafe, Patagonia Bend, and Mir for donating fantastic prizes for our giveaways. And we're going to contact the giveaway winner at the end of this event. And I'm finally just a big thank you to all of you, the community that is here tonight, the community that is part of ONDA. With over 5,000 members and more than 10,000 supporters, ONDA is committed to preserving Oregon's high desert for our generation and those to come. We defend public lands from threats, we partner with public and private land managers to preserve natural areas, and we encourage the responsible exploration of wild places. We also restore lands and waters to give desert creatures places in which to thrive. Your enthusiasm for learning about the unique aspects of Oregon's high desert landscape and how we can all work together to protect wild places like Oregon's Oahe is so very much appreciated. Please join us again next month for a geological journey of desert rivers led by geomorphologist Dr. Elizabeth Safran on March 30th. And then in April for Stories from the Sagebrush Sea with Ed John of Oregon Field Guide. You can learn more about these high desert speaker events at onda.org. So thank you again to our speakers tonight, and to all of you, good night.
Good night. And the comments just keep on coming.
I know.